Good evening. My name is Asad Lalji, and on behalf of my co-curator Ranjit Hoskote, who's right in front, we'd like to welcome you here to the inaugural session of the 18th edition of the Kalagora Arts Festival. The literature section of this festival is going to be housed in this magnificent David Sassoon Library Garden across the 9 days. And we're going to be featuring over 100 authors, pan-India and from 7 countries. The detailed programs are available online, and also you should have collected those little program booklets. You should have all the information there with you. This year again, we are very happy to bring back Bookstallation, which I think you can see out there. It's a community-driven art installation, book drive, and pop-up library, which we've had at the festival even last year. This year, it's been designed by the students of the JJ College of Architecture. Last year, there was such an overwhelming response to this installation that we had so many books that we donated them to NGOs and libraries across India. We urge you to try and experience this because it's truly a project for the people, by the people, of the people, in the spirit of this festival that is community power. If you're curious to know a little about the rich lineage of publishing in India, suggest you stop by the entrance. You'll see a display which we call #PublishingLegacy, which takes you through a panel tracing the history and legacy of English, Marathi, Gujarati, and Hindi publishing in India. The next part, I don't think you can actually see. Can you all see that? So we want you to get social, guys. To give our fans and followers a chance to interact with their favorite authors, we are hosting a special series of tweet chats, which we've tagged Voice Virus. We just did a Facebook Live, but so what we're going to do is we're going to invite select authors to join us for these sessions to give our audiences even more opportunities to interact with our authors. So we encourage you to, follow us, post, repost, tweet, retweet. Our handles are supposed to be on that screen. I'm not sure you can see it because it's kind of light. But do follow us and support us socially. So now, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the inaugural panel at the Kalagora Arts Festival 2017. Love, Loss, and What We Ate. Welcome Padma Lakshmi, all the way from the Big Apple, and Rashmi Uday Singh. They will be discussing Padma's memoir, her culinary journey from India to America, her award-winning show, Top Chef, and some of her experiences and successes as a person of Indian origin who's made it, big in the TV and food world all over. So, at this point in time, I thought everyone knows them, so what's the point of reading their bios? But my team out here has insisted I've got to read those bios out, so bear with me, I'm going to be quick. Padma Lakshmi, author, actress, model, television host, and executive producer of Top Chef. She was nominated for an Emmy Award for her role as host and judge of Bravo's Emmy Award-winning Top Chef, where she also serves as an executive producer. The show has just filmed its 14th season. Padma has established herself as a food expert, hosting successful cooking shows and writing bestsellers of cookbooks. Her memoir, the New York Times best-selling Love, Loss, and What We Ate, was released in March 2016. Rashmi Uday Singh, author, food critic, and a dear friend of the festival, is a TV host and award-winning author of 37 books. She is the jury chairperson of the Indian subcontinent of the London-based World's 50th Best Restaurant Academies and represents India in international forums. I was given this. Her book, A Vegetarian in Paris, was recently awarded the World Gourmand Cookbook Award, and she was recently conferred a knighthood by the French government. Before I request Padma and Rashmi to come on stage, I'm going to ask James Fennell, the Cultural Officer of the US Consulate General Mumbai, to come up and actually welcome Padma. So hope you enjoy the festival. Thank you for coming, and we want to see you there every day, all 9 days.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to say a warm thank you to Assad and congratulations to the Kalagoda Arts Festival. I'm very pleased, the Consulate's very delighted that we could have this partnership today to bring an American author and very pertinent to today, an Indian American author to help launch this event. I first want to thank Padma for very generously taking time out of her busy schedule to be with us today. And I also want to welcome Rashmi for joining us as well. You know, I can't think of a better way to spend a late, breezy afternoon than to talk about food and the next food and literature together. You know, you probably heard the saying that, you know, the best way to make peace with an adversary or get to know someone that you don't know is to share a meal with them. Well, that's true in diplomacy, and we use that a lot as well. But whether you're eating with or cooking for a head of state or just your family and friends, it's really around food that we get to know people, the people around us. And I think in that we get to know ourselves. And if I know anything about Padma and her book, I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about that today. I cannot think of a better artist than Padma to bridge both the American and Indian aspect of that. And I certainly can't think of a better piece of art than her book that she's going to talk about today to do that. So I know you're not here to listen to me, so that's pretty much all I'm going to say. And I want to welcome everyone and just want to reiterate how pleased we are that we could have this partnership today to bring an American author, Padma, to launch this wonderful arts festival that will go through the rest of the week. Thank you and enjoy it.
I know we are all waiting anxiously and delightedly to listen to Padma Lakshmi, who's here. I would just like to say a few things before we begin. The problem is we only have about now I think 55 minutes or 50 minutes, and I have about 150 questions to ask of her. Because I have actually for the last few days been devouring this brilliant memoir of hers, not been able to put it down, about this gorgeous, brilliant woman who has been through this high-octane, adventurous, brilliant life and put it all together evocatively. You can actually taste the flavors, the textures, not just of food, but for whole life. And I'm going to ask her just a few questions. But before I do, I'd like to say that I'm so thrilled to be here because we have at least 5 passions in common. One, of course, is food. And I read in an interview of yours where you said that you love food so much that you want to eat whatever you want to eat instead of sitting on your ass and starving. You'd much rather spend half your life in the gym.
Yes.
I agree with you. Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
We all love food. And then, of course, her passion for food and then having to eat and taste all the time and her top chef, leading to feeling like a human dumpster and then dealing with weight issues. And of course, her interest in vegetarianism. I share all that, and I'm just dying to ask all the questions. And finally, as though all this wasn't enough, she's also set up the Endometriosis Foundation of America, and I've also been suffering from the same problem. So I am so excited to talk to her. But now, first of all, welcome. This is her inaugural session of Kalagoda and her inaugural session of her book tour. So big hand for her, please, guys. She's actually going to walk out of here and walk the ramp, am I right?
Yes. If two things couldn't be more different. I want to say that I'm really honored to be here. This is the first time I'm doing a book event for any of my books in India, and it's quite a moving experience to be here with all of you. So I can't underline how special this is for me right now. So thank you.
And this memoir of hers is about 215 pages, and in it she captures, is it 215?
I don't know. I should know.
And I've actually marked out of one paragraph, and then she will take over and talk about what all she has to say. But firstly, this paragraph about how she expresses through food her emotions, memories, what's happening in her life. This is about, I marked it because particularly moved by it. It's about the kumquat chutney which she made when she had just broken off with Salman. So over to you, Padma.
It's actually 323 pages, but I'm glad you think it was only 200. That means it went by fast. So this is in the beginning of the book, just to put it in context. It is about almost 10 years ago, and the book starts where I have to move out of my marital home, and I'm in a hotel room, and I have towers and towers of boxes all around me, and I'm literally living in this like skyscraper of boxes around me, and I spent about 6 months living in a hotel by myself with just all of my possessions shoved into a room. I had to do something to cut through the grayness around me and the grayness inside. I picked up one of the kumquats and pressed my nail into its rind, releasing an aroma so faint I thought I'd imagined it. As a girl in Los Angeles, I made a game of stomping and squishing fallen kumquats as I walked to school. The kids on our block used to dare one another to eat them whole, plucked off the tree. Kumquats are very sweet and very sour. They're a small citrus fruit the size of a big green olive. Once in a while, one of us would take the dare, chomping down on the whole fruit, the sweet rind giving way to an explosion of bracingly sour pulp and the bitterness of broken seeds. Now, here in the hotel room, I licked the citric juice as it stung a torn cuticle. I could taste the sunshine and dirt of my mother's garden. I ached to be in her arms now, to bury myself in the cocoa butter creaminess of her soft breasts. Whenever I despaired, I thought of my mother and my grandmother, both of who had had lives much, much harder than mine.
Beautiful, thank you. So we see how just with that, and then she has a recipe of the kumquat chutney right after that. And this is how she weaves recipes and food right through the book. In fact, what is really interesting is that she demystifies Indian ingredients. Even for people like us, it's very exciting. She calls chaat and chatpata the Indian umami. Khichdi, the Indian version of chicken soup. I mean, it's mind-blowing what she's done and how this book has relevance even as like a kind of a history of Indian cuisine, how she's taken us through it. It's brilliant. But while I can go on and on about all the food, I would like to ask you, Padma, how long did it take you to write this book? And also, what were the difficult parts? Tell us a little more about it.
When I started to write the book, it was not supposed to be a memoir. It was supposed to be a self-help book about healthy eating. It was always supposed to have a lot of personal facts from my life in the book in a very honest way, but more to illustrate certain philosophies that I had had about food. And in the process of writing it, which start to finish, it took almost about 5 years to do, I found myself pulled more and more by the memoir side of the writing. And I had a very wonderful publisher named Dan Halpern, who is also a very esteemed poet in his own right. And he was very supportive. I was really terrified of writing this. I mean, other than this, I've only written cookbooks beforehand, and they had memoir essays in them, but they were very short essays, about 1 or 2 pages. And he was just saying, you know, keep going, just keep writing. We will trim away the bad stuff, but if you don't write it down, we have nothing to shape from. And I think that encouragement was critical for me to write this book. It was somebody I trusted, someone whom I also really respected. And that kind of support for, I mean, I'm not young, I'm 46, but for a young writer, I'm young to this genre, it was really critical to have that, you know, sort of metaphorical arm on my back, just pushing me forward. And I think there were parts of the book that were really wonderful and fun to write. There's been a lot reported about some of the more difficult parts of the book, but the book is also very funny. And if you've grown up in a middle-class home in any part of India, I think you'll be able to recognize them. And it talks about you know, life in Chennai in the 70s and in the 80s. And it also talks about something that I think all of us feel in one way or another about being an outsider, of feeling that you're on the outside looking in. And I certainly felt that all growing up, whether I was in America or in India. If you heard me on the phone and I said my name was Peggy Smith, you wouldn't think of me as somebody who was exotic or ethnic. But because of my appearance and because of my name, I felt very American because I had gone through American school system, etc. But I did feel like I was always looked at as the other and as not somebody who was wholly American. Toni Morrison, I just read, said something like, if you say American in America, it means you're white. Everyone else has to add a hyphenate to that American. And those Americans are also a big part of America, and in my opinion are what make American culture wonderful, because we are in microcosm what the world should aspire to assimilate and adopt the best of all cultures and distill a culture that works for most of us. And when I came to India, while I felt very, very Indian, my mother sent me to India every year for 3 months. So when June came around and school was out, I was on a plane the next week to Madras, to Chennai. And so because of spending 3 months out of every year, from the time I was 5 to the time I was 17, I feel very, very Indian. I feel just as Indian as all of my cousins. And yet here, when I, opened my mouth, or when I didn't have the same shared popular culture memories, I didn't know what the Bollywood films were, or who was the, most exciting cricket player. I didn't share that kind of common cultural history with my Indian peers, but I did feel very Indian. And so this idea of traversing two cultures and not really belong in either is a big theme in the book. But I don't think you have to necessarily go through that experience. I think you have to just have felt that in your life. We've all felt that, joining a new job, a new school. But those parts of the book were very wonderful to write. It was nice to put all the thoughts I had in somewhere on print, down, so that I could also look at my own life and explain some things about that to my daughter, who is biracial, for example. There were parts of the book that were very difficult to write. Obviously, it's not exhaustive. It's not an autobiography, but it is incredibly personal. And I think I just sort of forced myself to write about those aspects, because the kind of writing that I respond to personally is very raw, is very deep. And, there comes a point in every person's life who's on TV or in films where somebody will hand you a publishing contract. You don't even have to write the book yourself. And I didn't want this book to be that kind of book. I didn't want it to be a PR fluff piece. I wanted it to, whether it sold 5 copies or 500,000, I wanted it to be something that whoever read it would feel like they really understood who I was, beyond some picture that they saw in a magazine.
It truly is disarmingly frank. And it's, like you get kind of shaken up a little bit. My God, she's really, really frank. And it's beautifully written. In fact, your career in writing began, I think, in 2001, when you wrote for Vogue. And then she did a syndicated column for the New York Times and continued to write. But I think in this book, I think this is her magnum opus. For the serious writer has now been born and comes alive. It's absolutely mind-blowing. The fact, just tell me if I've got your name right, Padma Parvati Lakshmi Vaidyanathan, yes. Right? Padma Parvati Lakshmi Vaidyanathan, the daughter of an immigrant nurse from Chennai, rose to be this amazing Padma Lakshmi, unflappable top chef host. And then, of course, was known as the model who loved to eat and loved to cook. And then took over this top chef. She's not a nutritionist. She's not a trained chef. But her books are outstanding, including the latest one, which she's going to tell us right now about the herbs and the...
So there's another book, and I think it is available in India. It is a reference book, and it came out in October in America, and I think it's been out here for a couple of months. It's called The Encyclopedia of Spices and Herbs, and it's not personal at all, which was quite refreshing as well, but it is an A to Z reference guide. So if you ever open up a recipe or go to a foreign country and you're curious about a spice that you don't know, this book is aims to help you. So it's really for anyone who's a foodie or interested in knowing more about food. And I think for a long time I wanted a book like this, and I could never find one that was as comprehensive. And she's right, I don't have a degree in nutrition, and I've not gone to culinary school. And so when I first started hosting Top Chef, I did feel sort of imposter syndrome. I felt like somebody was going to find out that I shouldn't be doing the job I was doing, and I was very insecure about that. So, and I think that's a big part of the book too. Thank you, here it is. So if you don't want to know anything personal about me, but you like food, this is the book for you. I think this is my answer to that. I think I wanted to put all of the knowledge I had accumulated over the years through traveling and cooking and meeting other very talented chefs who I respected. And just, you know, I collaborated on this book with a wonderful editor named Judith Sutton, who is a very, very experienced researcher, and I was very lucky to have her help to cross-reference things. So I'm very proud of that book too. It's a much different book.
So while this is not personal, it is spices and herbs, and her personal memoir is very spicy indeed, and it's absolutely great fun to read. And other than the food element, is there anything else you want to tell us about the memoir before we move into another subject about your memoir?
I mean, there's so much to say. I don't know what to say. I will say that what I've been really moved by is the response I've gotten from average Indians who have read it. I was with my family in Chennai, and we were standing outside of a Thai restaurant, and this lady came up and introduced herself to me, and she said that she had read it, and the women in her family had been passing the book around. And, you know, for so long I felt like I wasn't part of the community of average Indians living in India, and it was something that I wanted to be so badly. I wanted to be considered Pakka Indian, you know, that I wasn't just some NRI coming back on vacation with white sneakers and, you know, eating ketchup or whatever. And so to have feedback from that woman who was a complete stranger, she seemed about my age, has been really wonderful, because for me, for Indians to accept this book and to find things that they can relate to was very important to me. Because as you guys will know, Indians all over the world contradict themselves left and right. It's very hard to make any general statements about life in India. You can have one life as, you know, an affluent person in Mumbai, another life as a small girl in some village, and there are 100 versions of what it means to be, or millions of versions of what it means to be Indian, or to have your own personal Indian story. And I wanted this to be an authentic representation of what home life was in our family. And so I hope that you enjoy those parts of the book as well.
In fact, your Indianness comes through brilliantly. What, you know, your life in Chennai, your mother, your grandmother, your grandfather, and this whole, you know, the whole Brahmin syndrome comes through brilliantly. And what is really admirable is how you've handled all the bits about love so tactfully, delicately, and yet frankly, about loss, and of course what we ate is amazing. Which brings me to the next topic, which is about food. You know, her journey, experiencing food is fascinating. She was a vegetarian from a vegetarian Brahmin family in Madras. Came to New York, where her mother was, and spent all her time eating rice in all kinds of different restaurants, because that was all that she could eat. And from eating rice, she went on to experiencing the world and becoming the globe-trotting gourmet that she is. In fact, what I find truly fascinating is that she straddles everything so effortlessly. And I was just reading about your visit to Noma, which is Rennie Redzeppe's restaurant in Copenhagen, and El Bulli you went to, which are the two restaurants which we have, the Academy, I'm the jury chairperson of my region,
yes, of
we've
course.
nominated it. So I was very interested to see what this young lady who started off by eating rice in different restaurants in New York has now got this amazing, well-exposed, globe-trotting palate. And so I wanted to ask you, what are your other favorite restaurants around the world? And in Mumbai, what do you enjoy?
Well, I went to Trishna the other night, and I loved Trishna. And Trishna for me was a great discovery because she's right. I grew up, and still, and to this day, in my grandmother's house, you can't bring in any meat, or you can't even get takeout. Like, never mind, using eggs on the ever silver plates or whatever. So, because I didn't grow up. I didn't go out eating independently of my family in India. There's a whole plethora of non-vegetarian Indian food that I didn't know about. And so discovering that as an adult, and about a decade ago, I traveled through India and I did a documentary called Planet Food. And it was wonderful to experience India as an adult, like just unfettered by the confines of my conservative family, even in food and in other aspects, of course. So I love Trishna. In Delhi, I like Bukhara. I know that there are other great restaurants here, but when I'm in Mumbai, I'm not really, frankly, interested in having Italian food or sort of new age combinations. I would be happiest going to eat bhel puri, in Juhu or something. Like, I will eat off the back of a truck. It doesn't matter what it is. And so to me, I think those are the real Indian stories where college students go after school for a samosa, or where everybody meets for chai after work. Like, those are the kinds of places that I'm most interested in, because I think you can tell a lot about a people by how they congregate and how they eat. So from an anthropological point of view, it's very interesting. But I'm also happiest there. Like, I've been lucky enough to go to restaurants like Noma and to El Bulli by Farhan Adria. And those have been magnificent experiences. I devote quite a few pages to describing both those meals. And I look forward to discovering other meals like that around the world. But where I'm really happiest is where average people or truck drivers who are crossing the country, which dhaba did they go to? I constantly scare my family because even my cousin Rohit, who lives here, will not eat the chutney at Bade Mia because he's afraid of the water because it's not cooked. But I had Bade Mia's as well down the road the other night, and it was delicious.
That's great to know.
Yes.
About Top Chef, just veering off a little bit, would you like to tell us what it's like to be there and how long it takes to film? And also, of course, the fallout, like how you have to keep eating all that stuff all the time and how you feel about it.
Well, let me preface what I'm about to describe by saying I have the best job in the world. I get to sit on my ass, as she says, and eat and talk about food all day long. And I think it's something I am uniquely qualified to do because I have an unlimited appetite and I have a lot of curiosity about food. So filming Top Chef, though, can be physically taxing. It takes us about 3 days to film an hour program. Food, and I really don't care about the backstory. I don't want it to cloud. I don't want to know that that guy had a migraine or this woman was left by her husband. I just want to know, because when you go to a restaurant, when you get a babysitter, get dressed up, pay, it can be like hundreds of dollars with wine and everything. You're not worried about who's cooking the food. You're just worried about that meal. And often people go to restaurants because they like one or two dishes, and they'll keep ordering the same dish when they go to their favorite restaurant. So the beginning of the season, when we have more contestants, one is eliminated every week. It's a little bit harder because there's so many dishes to taste. And I'm the only human being on the show. We have about 120 people who are permanently on the show and about 50 other people that we hire in every city that we film locally. So out of all of those people behind the camera and a few of us in front of the camera, I'm the only person who eats every single thing made on Top Chef. Now, I don't have to finish those plates, but I have to take 1 or 2 bites of each dish, enough for me to get a sense of that dish and judge it fairly. And so at the start of the season, when you have 18 or 19 chefs, it, you know, as she says, I talk about this, you do feel like a restaurant garbage can at the end of the day, because it's not like having, you know, your 3rd helping of lasagna. It's having lasagna and beef Wellington and Chateaubriand and all, like, souffle and everything else. And so it becomes physically taxing. And I'm lucky. I've always had a good stomach. It's why I could go to all those chaatwalas near India Gate in Delhi and here and everything. I have like all my marked out places that I want to eat at. Whenever I come to India, I have a mental laundry list to go through. But, you know, I do find it difficult. Hello? And so it becomes difficult, but it's a high-class problem to have. We make all sorts of potions and drinks to keep me healthy. I carry a jump rope in my suitcase so that I can exercise wherever I am. Often, you know, I'm so tired that I'm really just having my makeup done, showering, and then working, and then going to bed. I'm lucky I have a room, a playroom for my daughter on set next to my dressing room. So when we're filming, she's on set with me, which is a nice luxury to have. But it's, you know, after a while, you get used to it. You know, my wardrobe stylist on the show is always standing by my camera and has a tendency to go like this with their fingers, which means take smaller bites, take smaller bites. Because what people don't realize is that I also go through 3 different sizes, dress sizes, in the 6 weeks that I'm filming, because I gain weight so rapidly. And now that I've been doing the, you know, show for 10 years and I've had a baby and, you know, I'm not 20 anymore, I do have to be concerned about that. So what it takes me 6 weeks or 7 weeks to gain, it takes me at least 12 weeks to lose. And there's a lot that goes into it. It's just sweat equity. You know, you just have to spend the time in the gym. But I think I get a lot emotionally out of being physically fit as well. I box, I do Pilates, I do anything and everything I can. And I will often just drop down and do a couple of push-ups in my dress like this right before going out to film, because that's all the time I have. So my crew always laughs at me. They say I should carry my own camera pack around. You know, because our camera packs are like 45 pounds for our camera operators. So
I empathize with you completely, because when I'm working on my books, the restaurant guides, I'm eating, pecking right through and all kinds of different things. And you feel kind of sick by the end of it. But you have to taste, there's no choice. But what I admire about you is how you manage to overcome that and stay healthy and also stay fit. So what is that particular, you know, it's in the book, the recipe, which, yeah, what's it called? Just tell everybody about it.
So she's talking about one of these drinks, these potions that I consume. And when we're heavy in production, I probably drink this particular drink that I call Cranberry Drano. Drano is a brand of chemical that you put into drains when you have a clog of grease or whatever you have. It's a very corrosive thing that unblocks drains, so that's why we call it Drano. And it's basically a base of pure cranberry juice, about 4 ounces, and then 4 ounces of green tea that's been brewed hot with a little bit of honey, and then chilled and mixed with the cranberry juice. And added to that, it's a lot about my digestive system, you may not necessarily want to know, but we add fiber powder to that. And then we also add 1 gram of powdered vitamin C and B-complex vitamins and a whole bunch of other things that go into that. And that gets mixed for me. And I usually drink 1 of those before I taste, 1 of those after I taste, and then 1 at night before I go to sleep. And it's not a pleasant experience. You know, it's sort of like that medicine that your mother makes you take. So I wind up plugging my nose and just downing it as fast as I can. But it does help, you know, you have to do things. I have every medicine in my toiletry case that you could, every digestive medicine to, you know, keep me sort of in the middle of the road, so to speak.
That's great to hear. Before how much time do we have, Asad? Huh? Okay, lovely. Okay. So just a little bit more about food, about vegetarian food. Do you have any special, you are inclined to be vegetarian, though you eat everything. That's a lot like what I am too. So, in fact, I've got a book which I want to gift you, which is a vegetarian cookbook called Around the World in 80 Plates. So, yeah, so I just want to check with you, do you have any special thoughts about vegetarianism, about why it's good, or why do you, could you share with us?
Well, let me say first that I think there's not one diet that I believe is right for everybody. And that's sort of the book I was meant to write instead of this one. But I think that even one person at different times in your life, you have different needs. And so, for instance, when I was pregnant, I was eating one way. When I was nursing and wanted to lose weight, but, you know, eat healthy, I was eating another way. When I was in a state like the passage I wrote, where I was very, very depressed, and I lost an incredible amount of weight, and nothing I could do to put the weight back on. That's another way of eating. And I think it also depends on your age and, you know, how active you are. And so I think some people do need to eat meat. They feel healthier with that. I personally could be fine being a complete vegetarian tomorrow, because it's really how I grew up. And I didn't start eating meat until I was an adolescent in the States. And so I think my body isn't inclined to digest it well. And in my own personal life, I don't eat a lot of red meat. I'll eat some bacon or something, but you'll never catch me ordering like a big steak at a restaurant. It would never be my choice. And so my daughter and I lead a mostly plant-based diet with some chicken and fish thrown in there. And we make one meal at home. We usually cook a fresh meal for dinner, and then I wind up eating the leftovers as my lunch, because my office is also right next to my home. And so I'm a big believer in everyone in the family eating the same thing. I have a lot of mothers who come up to me. There's a lot about feeding your child and about the Annaprasanam ritual when the child is 6 months, etc. So a lot of mothers come up to me to say, you know, my child won't eat well, or my child only eats white things, or chicken nuggets, or whatever it is. And my first response to them is, well, how do you eat? And, you know, I think going without a meal or two is not a bad idea for any child. And I may be in the minority in this, but I think, you know, just getting the children to eat what you cook is a very good process, and also getting your children involved in the food they eat as early as possible, and as is, you know, age appropriate, is very wise, because a child that has a hand in making their own dinner is more likely to eat that dinner. They feel a sense of pride and proprietorship over what they've made. And it's also a great way for the family to bond. Most of us are living in, you know, a home environment where every adult is working, and, you know, the children also have activities and sports after school, and so that family meal in the evening is a very important and sacred thing for the life of that family. It's where, you know, family history is shared. It's where bonds are made. It's where a lot of discipline happens, and a lot of, you know, responsibility taken for who painted the floor with silver paint, etc. So I'm a big believer in the family meal. You know, whatever time it takes place. We have a lot of picnics on the floor in my room.
Oh, wow.
With me and Krishna, because we're lazy to go down to the dining room.
In fact, Krishna, she's 7 years old, right? No?
Almost 7. Yeah.
Almost 7. Krishna actually loves pickling, and her recipe for pickled peppers is the last recipe in the book. Very interesting recipe, which is amazing that a 7-year-old should be so passionate and sensitive to vegetables, to pickling. That's quite amazing.
Well, when she did those pickles, she was much younger. She was probably only 2.5. When I'm talking about pickling, I'm not talking about making achar. I'm talking about like Western gherkins and things like that. And, you know, we live in the Northeast, and so in New York, in the winter, there's not a lot of fresh produce to be had that's locally grown. And so in October is when all of the beautiful chili peppers come to the Union Square Farmers Market. And one of our most favorite activities is to go and buy our vegetables at this outdoor farmers market. And so she loved the chilies when she was a toddler because of how beautiful and vibrant the colors were. We had, you know, habanero peppers and these orange salt bonnets and these fiery, you know, poppy red chilies, and obviously a lot of them were too spicy for her to eat, but she could pickle. She could pickle them in salted vinegar or in brine. And so you can find ways to introduce cooking to children that doesn't involve knives or heat. And now we always fight about why she can't stand at the stove and stir the sambar, because I'm terrified. This thing happened to me when I was 5 years old. I pulled up a chair to my mother's stove in New York, and she was boiling potatoes because she's making curry, like puri mas, potato curry puri mas for my uncle who's visiting. And I wanted to stir, just like Krishna wants to stir. And I took a wooden spoon and I brought a dining table chair to the stove, and I started stirring this huge stew pot, and I poured boiling water all over my legs. I still have, my legs are really atrocious because I still have those burns from when I was 4. So I'm always a little paranoid. Also because my stove is much more powerful than the one my mother had in the 70s. Not really into cars, but I have the Maserati of stoves so, at home. So, you know, I'm always a little trepidatious about that. I really believe that getting your children involved, you know, it's just like breaking the ends off beans and peeling potatoes or whatever.
That's lovely. Now, I just wanted, this is something totally not connected to food. You've always been a very, very vocal feminist, right? In fact, you've even taken your mother's name, Lakshmi, right? Because your mother changed her name to Vijaya Lakshmi after she divorced your father. So, and you've always been very vocal about it. You just went for a women's march in Washington with your daughter. Now, with this whole change in the administration in the US, what do you have to say about this whole feminism, women's movement, and what's happening in America?
I'm here as a guest of the U.S. consulate, so I want to be mindful of that. But I'm an American, and I was very politically involved with this election, as well as with Obama's 2 elections. I campaigned heavily for Obama. And I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm actually a registered independent. But I have certainly voted Democrat for a long time. And the first president that I voted for was a Clinton. I was eligible for American citizenship since 1979 because of my mother. But I had a green card until 1994 because I still felt very Indian and I wanted to keep my Indian passport. And I wound up becoming an American citizen so that I could vote for Bill Clinton. Because at the time I had just finished college and I was a financial aid student. And I saw how my grants were cut by the prior administration. And so I wanted to vote, and that's why I became a U.S. citizen. And so the whole election thing, and you know, is a very important and serious topic for me. But even regardless of who's in office, I think it's, you know, for a long time, feminism got a bad name. And every one of us in the U.S. owes a lot to second wave feminism that happened during the 70s. And I think my mother heard about all of that here in India. And she had an arranged marriage that was very difficult. She divorced in 1972. And at that time in India, as now in many communities, being a divorcee is very taboo. And so I think she went to America to seek a better life for us. And so, you know, we owe a lot to Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan and all these other women. And there was a time about 20 years ago until very recently where when women in the public eye were asked, a lot of young actresses and models and stuff, if they were feminists, they would say, oh, I wouldn't call myself a feminist. Or, no, I'm not that kind of feminist. And so it was very important for me to take that word back And I am a feminist, and I don't think I could be friends with anyone of either gender who wasn't a feminist. Because a feminist just means that you believe in equal rights for both genders. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that, I know very conservatively minded women, very politically conservative women who are feminists. I know pro-life feminists. I know feminists of all ages and stations in life, and I think it's important to take that term back and understand that when you're talking about feminism, whether you're talking about it in India or in America, that it's really a civil rights issue. And it is an issue that touches everyone. It doesn't just touch women. If you love a woman, if you have a daughter, we all came from women. So somewhere along the line, there's a woman in your life who you love. And so I find it astonishing when anybody does not identify as a woman. And I think that crosses all sorts of geographical and political lines. And I think that people use the subjugation of women to subjugate other members of society in many cultures around the world. And so I think it is also, by the way, what separates the West and the fundamentalist East. Not the secular East, but the fundamentalist East. We don't talk about it in that way, but this whole terrorism thing in the States, this whole, radical Islam versus Western secular culture, it is about women. What is the difference? It is the subjugation of women and women's rights, preventing women from working, voting, driving, owning property, dressing the way they want, all of that. That is the real difference. We hear a lot about, obviously the Muslim ban is very much top of mind on everyone's, and in everyone's conversation. I've been asked about it so much. And as an immigrant, to America, it's something that cuts very, very close to home. And, I've already said what I think about immigration and how it has made America what it is. But I also think that we're not looking at the Middle Eastern issue through this lens of feminism. And I think if more people in power who would never consider themselves feminists in the government looked at it that way, they would see that subversively, even they are feminists.
That's lovely. Everybody's a feminist. Okay, and just could you tell us a little bit about your endometriosis foundation?
I have suffered from endometriosis since I was 13. It is a gynecological condition that affects about 200 million people, women worldwide of childbearing age. It is the leading cause of hysterectomies in women, and it is one of the 3 leading causes of infertility in women. But even if you are not at a point in your life where you're thinking about your children, it is a devastating disease that develops part and parcel with puberty and with your womanhood. And so it comes on at a very vulnerable time in a young girl's life. And there are a lot of physical ramifications associated with endometriosis, but there are as many emotional ones because it wreaks havoc with your hormones. And we didn't really have the technology to do much about it 25, 30 years ago, but now we do. And I speak about my journey with the disease as well as founding the charitable foundation that I started with my surgeon, Dr. Tamer Sechkin, 8 years ago, because I didn't know about it. I had access to good medical care in, whether it was London or New York or Los Angeles, and I've always had good health insurance, and yet I fell through the cracks. And I didn't want the next generation of women to go through, and girls to go through what I did. And so we started the foundation, and we've been very fortunate to do a lot of great work. We helped launch a research center at MIT in conjunction with Harvard Medical School. We've also educated over 16,000 adolescents in the New York area about this disease. And so other than being a mother, I would say that it's the most gratifying work that I do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And she's a serious multitasker. She's really amazing because she actually has her own jewelry line.
I used to, I don't anymore.
Okay, but you used to have it, and your spices and herbs.
Yes.
You still do that.
I don't do that, but
Okay.
that was a one-off,
Okay.
like a short run. But
Okay.
yes, I've had different businesses.
Okay, and are you planning anything new right now? Any new book or any business or anything?
I promised my family I wouldn't write another book until at least the end of this year because, my daughter Krishna does an impression of me, and the first time she did it in front of me, it made me cry because it was just like, no, I can't, I'm working, mommy's writing, mommy has to edit, mommy has to make this deadline. So I promised my loved ones I would do nothing except film Top Chef for the rest of the year so that I could go to the beach and I could go to the movies and I could do whatever else. And I think my office is also looking forward to me not being on book tour as well. But obviously I would love to write another book. So if anyone has a good idea for another book, I'm all ears. You could just ping me on any of my social media because after doing this book, I think I probably won't write another memoir for a long time. I have to live a little. But I would like to do another cookbook. So maybe that's in the horizon. Nobody minds me doing a cookbook because it means I'm always in the kitchen cooking.
Cooking for them. Asad, how much time more? Okay, lovely. Yeah. So we just wanted to know if anybody has any questions to ask so we can pass the mic around. Any questions? Can we pass him a mic, please? Just identify yourself and then your question.
My name is Anand. You said we all learn about food as kids, as children. So let me modify that. You also learn about it as an international grad student, broke in the US and in France. So curious, do you think, because I see the book, obviously literary event, do you think food has lost a lot to the image, the power of image, not selfies, but the stills or the videos, Top Chef, versus the written word, what you can express.
Great question. You mean because we're all photographing food for Instagram and things like that?
And the taste and the texture and the smell, aromas.
I think good literature will always find its audience. I grew up reading M.F.K. Fisher and Calvin Trillin and some of the most beautiful passages in Edith Wharton, for example, in The Age of Innocence, is when she's describing this, nouveau riche socialite preparing this wonderful dinner with these stuffed pheasants and, this sort of opulent meal. If you haven't read the book and you don't have time, you should read the book, but if you haven't, Scorsese's Age of Innocence is just such a beautiful rendering of this. And so I do think that the written word will continue. Whether it continues digitally or in hard copy, it will continue as long as people have stories to tell. And I think it's important also that we tell our stories because the one thing that I found interesting on book tour in the States is that people would come up to me and tell me their stories. I would meet Chinese immigrants or Colombians who would say, we weren't making khichdi, but I made arepas with my grandmother and it was the same.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello. Here.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Hi, Padma. Many congratulations. My question is that why hasn't any of the Indian food made it global, like how we have pizzas and burgers? Is it the standardization of food, or it's like the Indian palate is not very, you may say, acceptable worldwide? What do you think, why we are lacking?
I think it's coming. I think in New York alone, there have been several restaurants in all levels, like fine dining and also like party roll places like Kunde Wala and stuff in the village. I think it's happening. I think you will see a renaissance in Indian food and that kind of global transformation in the next few decades. I mean, if you think about it, a kati roll is just a soft taco. So, it is happening, and it's happening slowly. I think one reason it hasn't happened faster is because of the availability of really authentic ingredients. But for instance, now you can get fresh curry leaves, you can get tamarind concentrate in the middle of the country. Before you could only get it at an Indian store in New York or Los Angeles. And I think a lot of it has to do with the availability of those ingredients.
my next question, would you like to eat your food with your fingers or you like the fork and knife?
Well, it depends what I'm eating, but when I eat hamara kana, I eat with my fingers, yeah.
There's also the chicken tikka masala, which has become the national dish of UK. So we are getting somewhere. Okay, so that's it. Any other question? No, that's it. Okay.
We're done.
Okay, young girl.
What did you learn about yourself while writing Love, Loss, and What We Ate?
That's a great question, thank you. I learned a lot about myself in writing it, and I learned a lot not only because of the content, but just the exercise of writing it. A lot of it was, we didn't go into it, but a lot of it was really excruciating. I'm talking about my gynecology, I'm talking about, my sex life, I'm talking about motherhood, I'm talking about a lot of very personal issues that were embarrassing and difficult for me to also deal with, especially as an Indian woman. I mean, I know I've lived all over the world and stuff, and I'm a grown woman, and no one's going to get mad at me anymore around me. But in my heart, I'm still an Indian child, and most of my family is still here in India, and they're pretty conservative. So, they read the papers, especially when it's about me. So those moments were really hard to write about, but they were important to write about because the exercise of doing it meant that I also took responsibility for my actions. A lot of them that I was sorry about, and a lot of mistakes that I had made, or people that I had hurt along the way. And it was also, as Indian women especially, we're always taught to be reserved. Not to talk too much, not to reveal too much. At least I was brought up that way. And so to go from that to writing about the issues that I do in such a public forum was a life changer for me, because I was finally, for the first time in my life, not afraid of what anybody else thought. And that is a very liberating thing to happen to you as an adult, and specifically as a woman. Because we're always taught to worry about that, and with good reason, obviously, but I think just to cross that obstacle and cross that speed bump in my own evolution as an artist and writer, but also as just a normal woman and family member, was huge. Nobody can say anything I haven't said about myself.
That's a good one. So on that note, I'd like to thank you. It's been amazing, and your book is really, really fabulous. It's been wonderful meeting you, and thank you for sharing all your time and everything. And finally, I'd just like to say, on a personal note, it's been amazing for me. I've just come back from Tokyo and eating sea snake, and from Machu Picchu eating ants' eggs. So I'm definitely going to get that cranberry Drano as soon as I go home. So it's been fabulous. Thank you ever so much. A big hand for her, please. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and I want to thank the U.S. Consulate for arranging this tour, as well as the Kala Goda Festival. I'm very honored to be here doing the inaugural address. Thank you so much to everyone who worked hard to arrange the trip.
And we wish you a great book tour.